Shabbat Shalom. So there is a memo that exists from President Abraham Lincoln to Secretary of War Edwin Stanton from 1862, where he addresses a political problem that they're having, which is to say that there are no Jewish officers in the army. He writes the following: I believe we have not yet appointed a Hebrew. I believe we have not yet appointed a Hebrew. And to rectify this problem, he appoints the son-in-law of New York Rabbi Morris Rafal as a captain with the title of assistant quartermaster. And Professor Jonathan Sarna of Brandeis, who is without question the greatest contemporary history of American Jewry, writes that this may be the first case of affirmative action in US history. Okay, question is, why did Lincoln write to Stanton about the problem that they had not yet appointed a Hebrew as an officer in the army, right? Where does the name Hebrew come from? Now, of course, Abraham Lincoln is Abraham, right? And he was known, right? In our Parsha, it says when Lot, his nephew, was kidnapped and taken away as a POW, and it says a fugitive brought the news to Avram HaIvri, to Abram the Hebrew, right? And the origin and the meaning of Hebrew has long puzzled students of the Bible, okay? And in Genesis Rabbah, it connects the word Hebrew to Avram's non-conformism, right? All the world was on one side and he on the other. The word for side, like the side of a river, is Ever. Okay, so it connects the term Ivri to the word Ever. He stands on one Ever, everybody else on the other, okay, which, is something of a Jewish trait. I mean, there was a whole book published in 2005 called Jewish Distinctiveness in America, a Statistical Portrait, right? And Jews are in many ways different than other Americans. I mean, we are far more charitable than the average American. We also, as a whole, differ politically. I mean, without getting into good, bad, or indifferent, right? If you look at the educational status and the economic status of American Jews, you would expect American Jews to be mostly Republicans, right? And frankly, I've been following this stuff long enough. Every 4 years, the Republican Jews say, this is finally the year that American Jews will come to their senses and vote Republican, and we don't come to our senses. We don't vote, some of us do, but 80% of Jews vote Democratic, right? And if you look simply at our affluence, you would not predict it, right? Like I think it was William Kristol, the sociologist, who said Jews earn like Episcopalians and vote like Puerto Ricans. And it's true, right? We are distinctive in that sense. Okay, but Professor Jonathan Sarna's late father, the biblical scholar Nachum Sarna, concluded that Hebrew was really an ethnic designation, like Canaanite or Moabite. But there are all kinds of theories, but by the time of King David, right? So if you look at the descriptions of the slavery in Egypt and the Exodus, they're called Ivri'im, Hebrews, right? But by the time, right after the Exodus, they're no longer called Ivri'im. What are they called? Bnei Yisrael, right? Which we kind of wrongly translate as children of Israel, but Bnei Israel doesn't really mean children of Israel. It means Israelites is really a better translation, right? And for most of our history, we've been known not as Ivri'im and not as Bnei Yisrael, but as Jews, right? But in Hebrew, in rabbinic Hebrew, it's still far more common to find if somebody is known as a non-Jew, it won't say Eino Yehudi, it'll say Eino Yisrael. Okay, so rabbinic Hebrew still has been kind of slow to pick that up, but there is, some of you have seen this, right? You know that I can be pedantic at times, right? And if you say, well, when the Jews left Egypt, I'm going to give you a look, right? Because the Jews didn't leave Egypt, the Israelites left Egypt, right? But, so for most of our history, we've been known as Jews, but there's also been a stigma to the word Jew. Right, so in around revolutionary times, Jews in America chose to be known as Israelites, right? So, but when the Jews in Newport, Rhode Island, wrote a letter to George Washington, who was then visit, right? They called themselves the children of the stock of Abraham. Okay, and Washington used the same term in his response letter, but also sometimes they called it, like in Germany, very common at the time to refer to people of the Mosaic persuasion, right? It doesn't mean we're big fans of tile floors, right? It means we're followers of Moses, Mosaicism. Right, but the term that really took on in post-revolutionary America was Hebrew, right? So if you look at, for example, the YMHA, right? The Young Men's Hebrew Association, right? Or my alma mater, Hebrew Union College, right? Or up until fairly recently, what's now the Union for Reform Judaism was known as the Union of American Hebrew Congregations, right? I mean, if you look at that name, you can tell that was probably founded in the 1870s or the 1880s, right? When Jews thought that they would be called Hebrews and that this would associate them in the public mind with Abraham the Hebrew or the noble Israelites of the Hebrew Bible. And this became the socially acceptable, or if you want to use it differently, the politically correct term for Jews, whereas the word Jew was seen as pejorative, right? And non-Jews frequently used it in a derogatory, and this is still the case, right? And sometimes not even meaning. I mean, you still, every once in a while, you will hear a case of some ignorant politician getting caught saying, we're gonna let out a bid for the contract and we're gonna try to Jew them down. right? And then when they're called on it, sometimes they're like honestly shocked that that's offensive, right? I mean this seriously, right? People don't necessarily know that like to Jew somebody down is an offensive term, right? But with the rise of social anti-Semitism in the late 19th century, the stigma that was applied to the word Jew became applied to the word Hebrew, right? So what is the best way to conquer that, right, is to reclaim the word Jew, right? And that's what people started to do, right? And therefore, so you had the Hebrew Union College, but not long after, right, about 10, 15 years after the Hebrew Union College, you had the Jewish Theological Seminary and the Jewish Publication Society, and the Hebrew War Veterans changed their name to Jewish War Veterans, and YMHAs became JCCs, Jewish Community Centers, right? The Oxford Dictionary now says if you use the term Hebrew, it's dated and offensive, right? But the attempts to rebrand ourselves, right? And I'm all in favor of it, right? And you see even now with the rise of anti-Semitism, right? And we have to really be careful. I mean, statistics indicate that the percentage of Americans who harbor anti-Semitic ideas is not increasing, right? The acceptability of expressing anti-Semitic ideas is increasing, right? Because prominent people on the right and prominent people on the left do it, right? And therefore, the fact that, you know, Kanye or Kyrie Irving are paying a price, I think is a good thing, right? Because look, you're not going to change Kanye's mind, right? And you're not going to change Kyrie Irving's mind, I don't think. All right, he's apologized and he may, I'm not going to say he's not sincere in his apology. I don't know the man, right? But I have my doubts, right? But if it costs you, then you don't express it, right? And then if you're not allowed to express it, people who admire you won't express it either, right? I mean, I have to say, in my opinion, the biggest purveyor of anti-Semitism on the right, who happens to have a Jewish daughter and a Jewish son-in-law, doesn't seem to have paid the price, right? Even among Jews, that remains to be seen, right? But you have to make the expression of anti-Semitism unacceptable, and therefore the people who harbor those ideas will be afraid to express them. And this, in my mind, is a good thing. I don't know that you can change people's minds, but you can change their behavior, right? And there needs to be enforced. So we need to, I think, reclaim, and people are. I mean, people are walking around wearing Jewish stars who hadn't, right, for a long time. People, you know, are reclaiming in public their Jewishness, and I think that this is a good thing, right? But ultimately, rebranding only has so much efficiency, and we have to maintain from that fierce nonconformist Abram the Hebrew, we stand our ground even when all the world is on one side and we on the other. Shabbat Shalom.
Rabbi,
Yeah,
Question. On
Yeah.
on a number of, I don't know others, but on a number of medical documents, it asks to identify as religion and also as ethnicity. How does that pertain to the linguistic part that you've been talking about this morning?
well, I mean, I'm not sure what they mean by ethnicity, okay? I mean, if they mean, you know, white, Latino, or white, Hispanic, African American, Asian American, there are Jews who fit all of those categories, right? I mean, Judaism in that sense, Judaism is not a racial classification, right? It can be an ethnic classification. I mean, that, you know, but then again, in Israel, right, where, you know, 80% of the people are Jewish, your ethnicity is like Yemenite or Polish or Romanian or Moroccan or whatever. I mean, I think ethnicity to a certain extent is a meaningless term. So I'm not, Baruch Hashem, I haven't been in the hospital for a while, so I'm not sure exactly to what you're referring.
Well, the reason for my confusion is I have been, and on the forms that I'm filling out, it lists several things, but it includes ethnicity and religion, and then it also includes Hispanic, not Hispanic, etc. So in a way, your answer respectfully is still not unconfusing me. I guess what I'm really saying is, and I'm not asking you to dictate for all of us, I'm simply saying when a Jewish person is completing that, then basically it's redundant to even deal with ethnicity. I mean, if you choose to identify, you're simply saying Hebrew or Jewish.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the purpose of that question. I mean, look, there are certain things where there are ethnic sensitivities, right? So hospitals need to be aware of those, right? I can't answer your question because I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Dr. Zapor might know. Not to put you on the spot, but I really don't know.
Okay.
I really don't know beyond that.
I think sometimes also hospitals will collect demographic information because that's going to inform the programs they do, the funding that they ask for, reimbursement from the government. So some of it's census information.
Okay.
So we continue with the Kaddish before Musaf and Musaf service 150.